Zawadi's world had always been filled with laughter and love. She would run barefoot through the golden fields, her mother's gentle voice calling her home as the sun dipped below the horizon. Nia was the heart of their home, a woman whose kindness was known throughout the village. She would tell Zawadi stories of brave women and wise queens, planting dreams of strength and resilience in her young daughter's heart. Mtemi, her father, was a man of few words but a heart full of love. He worked tirelessly, ensuring his family never lacked anything. Their little home was modest but filled with warmth, and Zawadi felt safe in the arms of her mother. But happiness is fragile. One cold night, Nia fell ill. It started with a fever, then weakness took over her body. The village healers tried everything, but the sickness showed no mercy. Zawadi held her mother's hand, whispering prayers, refusing to believe that the woman who was her entire world could leave her. But the night stole her mother away, and by sunrise, Zawadi's laughter was replaced with silence. She cried until her voice was gone, clutching the only piece of cloth her mother had left behind. Her father, too broken to speak, buried himself in work, his eyes hollow and distant. Their home, once filled with stories and songs, became just walls and shadow. As months passed, loneliness clawed at Mtemi's heart. The villagers whispered that a man could not live without a wife, that Zawadi needed a mother. And so, when a woman named Mama Jabari arrived in the village, charming and graceful, Mtemi saw her as a second chance at happiness. He did not see the warning in Zawadi's eyes, the way her heart screamed that something was not right. He only saw a woman who could fill the void Nia had left. Within a year, Mama Jabari became the new wife of Mtemi and the new mother of Zawadi. But the moment the wedding ended, the mask of kindness slipped. Mama Jabari's smile turned sharp, her words colder. She did not see Zawadi as a daughter, but as an unwanted piece of the past. And slowly, bit by bit, she began to erase every trace of Nia from the house. The stories stopped, the songs faded, and Zawadi's world, already broken, began to crumble even more. When Mama Jabari first arrived, the village was in awe of her beauty and grace. She carried herself like a queen, with smooth, practiced smiles, and a voice that dripped with sweetness. She spoke kindly to the elders, helped the women fetch water, and even gifted small trinkets to the children. The village believed Mtemi had been blessed with a good woman, someone who would fill the void left by Nia's passing. But behind her charming eyes was a heart filled with jealousy and deceit. The moment she stepped inside Mtemi's home, everything changed. The warmth that once lived in those walls began to fade. She watched Zawadi carefully, studying her like a hunter watching prey. The little girl's face was a painful reminder of Nia. Her delicate features, her kind eyes, the way she carried herself with quiet grace. And worst of all, Mtemi still looked at his daughter with love, still spoke of Nia with sadness in his voice. That was unacceptable to Mama Jabari. She had not married a widower only to compete with the ghost of his past. At first, her cruelty was subtle. She would accidentally spill Zawadi's food, leaving her hungry. She would give her the smallest portions and say, "A child must not eat more than they deserve." When Mtemi was around, she acted like a doting mother, smoothing Zawadi's hair and calling her, "my sweet girl." But when he left, her fingers would tighten around the girl's arm, her voice dropping to a whisper, "You are nothing in this house." Slowly, she began planting seeds of doubt in Mtemi's mind. She sighed whenever Zawadi entered the room, shaking her head as if burdened by some terrible secret. When Mtemi asked what was wrong, she would hesitate, then say, "I do not wish to speak against your daughter, but she is difficult. She refuses to listen. She disrespects me." At first, Mtemi dismissed it, but the whispers continued. "She looks at me with hatred, my love. She does not accept me as her mother. I fear she has inherited her mother's stubbornness." Zawadi noticed the change in her father. His once gentle voice became sharper when he spoke to her. His eyes, which used to hold warmth, now carried doubt. He no longer asked if she had eaten. He no longer noticed when her clothes grew thin or when she shivered at night. Mama Jabari's poison was working. She was pulling Mtemi further and further away, wrapping him in her web of lies. The villagers did not see this side of her. To them, she was still the kind and caring wife. She still smiled at the marketplace, still helped the women with their chores, still laughed at the men's jokes. But inside the house, she ruled like a tyrant, and no one suffered more than Zawadi. One evening, as Zawadi sat outside under the moonlight, tracing patterns in the dirt with her fingers, Mama Jabari approached her. She crouched beside her, her nails digging into the girl's wrist. "Your father will forget you," she whispered, her breath warm against Zawadi's ear. "I will make sure of it." And as the days turned into weeks, Zawadi felt her mother's presence slipping away, her father's love fading, and the walls of her home closing in like a prison. Zawadi's life turned into a never-ending nightmare. From the moment she opened her eyes in the morning until she collapsed from exhaustion at night, there was no peace. Mama Jabari had made it clear. Zawadi was nothing more than a servant in her own home. The chores never ended. She fetched water from the well before the sun rose, swept the entire house, cooked meals she was never allowed to eat properly, and washed clothes until her fingers bled. Meanwhile, Ayo, Mama Jabari's daughter, lived like a princess. She wore the finest clothes, ate the best food, and spent her days playing while Zawadi worked. The worst part was the hunger. Zawadi was always given the smallest portion of food, sometimes just scraps left after Mama Jabari and Ayo had eaten. If she dared ask for more, Mama Jabari would glare at her with cold eyes and say, "A girl who does not work hard does not deserve to eat." There were nights when her stomach ached so badly that she bit down on her own fingers just to distract herself from the pain. Her bed was nothing more than a thin mat on the cold, hard floor. She shivered through the nights, curling into herself for warmth. If she made even the smallest noise, Mama Jabari would wake up and storm into the room, yanking Zawadi's ear so hard that tears filled her eyes. "Do not disturb my sleep, useless girl," she would hiss before leaving her in the darkness. But the real horror came when Mtemi was away. With no one to pretend for, Mama Jabari dropped all pretense of being a good stepmother. She would slap Zawadi for no reason, yank her by the hair if she was too slow, and sometimes, just to remind her of her place, she would lock her outside at night. On those nights, Zawadi sat curled up against the door, her small body trembling from fear and cold. The sounds of the wild animals in the distance terrified her, but nothing was more frightening than the thought that her father would never know what was happening to her. The villagers saw glimpses of Zawadi's suffering. They saw how thin she had become, how her once bright eyes were now dull and lifeless. They saw the bruises on her arms, the way she flinched when someone raised their hand too quickly. But Mama Jabari was clever. She always had an explanation. "She is clumsy," she would say, shaking her head in fake disappointment. "She does not listen. She falls. She hurts herself." And because no one wanted to question the wife of Mtemi, they believed her. Zawadi wanted to scream, to tell them the truth, to beg someone, anyone, to save her. But she knew no one would. Mama Jabari had made sure of that. So she swallowed her pain, hid her tears, and continued to suffer in silence. Despite all the suffering, Zawadi grew into a young girl whose beauty and intelligence could not be hidden. She was no longer the small, helpless child Mama Jabari had once controlled so easily. Even in the midst of her struggles, there was something about her that shined. Her kindness, her strength, her resilience. She still carried the warmth of her mother in her heart. And even though her clothes were worn and her stomach was often empty, she moved with grace. Villagers noticed how, despite everything, she remained different from Ayo. While Ayo was spoiled and arrogant, Zawadi was wise beyond her years. Mama Jabari saw this too, and it made her blood boil. No matter how much she starved Zawadi, no matter how many times she humiliated her, the girl remained strong. And worst of all, Mtemi had started to notice. Though Mama Jabari had spent years poisoning his mind against Zawadi, there were moments when his eyes softened when he looked at her, moments when he hesitated before scolding her. Mama Jabari feared that if Mtemi ever realized the truth, he would turn against her. He would see that it was not Zawadi who was a problem, it was her. That fear turned into pure hatred, and one night, that hatred consumed her completely. It was a quiet evening. and the house was still. Zawadi, exhausted from a long day of work, had finally closed her eyes on the cold floor where she slept. Mama Jabari stood over her, staring at the girl who had become her greatest threat. Her hands trembled with rage. She could not let Zawadi continue to grow into a woman who might one day take her place in Matemi's heart. She needed to do something permanent, something that would ensure Zawadi would never be a threat again. With a steady hand, she reached into the folds of her clothing and pulled out a small bottle filled with a dark, thick liquid. It was a poison made from crushed herbs, one that would not kill but destroy. Slowly, she uncorked the bottle and leaned over Zawadi, pouring the liquid carefully into the girl's closed eyes. At first, there was silence. Then, as the liquid seeped in, a scream tore through the house. Zawadi clutched her face, thrashing on the floor, her hands clawing at her burning eyes. The pain was unlike anything she had ever felt before. It felt as if fire had been poured into her skull, as if needles were stabbing into her very soul. She screamed for her father, for help, but no one came. By the time morning arrived, the pain had become something even worse: darkness. When Zawadi opened her eyes, there was nothing. No light, no colors, just a deep, terrifying emptiness. She was blind, but Mama Jabari did not stop there. When the villagers asked what had happened, she shook her head in feigned sorrow. "The spirits have punished her," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. She was always disobedient, always questioning her elders. This is what happens when a child does not respect the ways of her people. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some villagers pitied Zawadi, but others whispered that maybe it was true. Maybe she had been cursed. Maybe the spirits had truly taken her sight as punishment. No one dared to question Mama Jabari. And just like that, Zawadi, once a girl with dreams, was left in darkness, alone, helpless, and at the mercy of the woman who had stolen her future. Zawadi had always believed that no matter how much Mama Jabari hated her, her father would never abandon her. But she was wrong. Ever since she lost her sight, Matemi barely looked at her. The man who once held her hand as she stumbled through her first steps now saw her as nothing more than a burden. He did not question Mama Jabari's words when she told him Zawadi was cursed, that she had brought misfortune upon herself. Mama Jabari played her part well. She sighed heavily whenever she spoke about Zawadi, shaking her head as if burdened by a great sorrow. "My love, we cannot keep her here," she whispered to Mamtemi late at night. "She brings shame to our home. The spirits have punished her, and yet she stays eating food she does not deserve, taking space that should belong to Ayo." Matemi resisted at first. He was still a father after all. But Mama Jabari was patient, feeding him her poison day by day. "Do you want to be known as the man who keeps a cursed child? Do you want our family to suffer because of her?" she asked one evening, her voice dripping with concern. "The only way to restore balance is to let her go." Mtemi gave in. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Zawadi was led out of the house she had once called home. She clung to her father's arm, confused. "Baba, where are we going?" she asked softly, but he did not answer. The journey was long. She could hear the sounds of the village fading behind them, the familiar voices of children playing replaced by the eerie silence of the forest. Fear crept into her heart. Then they stopped. "Stay here," Bentemi said, his voice hollow, void of the love it once held. Zawadi felt his grip loosen. She reached out blindly, her fingers brushing against empty air. "Baba!" she called, panic rising in her throat. But there was no reply, only the sound of footsteps retreating, fading into the distance. She was alone. At first, she refused to believe it. Maybe it was a test. Maybe if she waited long enough, he would return. But as the minutes turned to hours, the truth settled in like a heavy weight on her chest. She had been abandoned. The forest was alive with unfamiliar sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant howl of animals, the croaking of frogs near the riverbank. She shivered, hugging herself, the night air cold against her skin. Her stomach ached with hunger, her throat dry from crying. She screamed for help, but only the wind answered. Despair swallowed her whole. This was how she would die, alone, blind, and forgotten. She thought of her mother, of the warmth she used to bring, Would she be proud of the girl she had become? Would she weep for her if she knew how much she had suffered? Just as she was ready to surrender to the darkness, she heard something. Footsteps. Slow, careful, deliberate. Someone was coming. She held her breath, her heart pounding against her ribs. Was it her father, finally realizing his mistake? Or was it something far worse? The footsteps grew closer, slow but steady. Zawadi held her breath, fear gripping her chest. She had no way to run, no way to see who was approaching. Her heart pounded as she heard the soft rustle of fabric, the steady breathing of someone standing nearby. Then, a gentle voice broke through the silence. "Child, you are not alone." The voice was deep, warm, and filled with kindness, nothing like the cruel whispers of Mama Jabari. A wrinkled hand touched her shoulder, firm yet comforting. "You are safe now," the man said. His name was Baba Kamari, a wise old healer who lived deep in the mountains, far from the village. Known by few and feared by many, he was said to possess knowledge of ancient magic and healing that had been passed down for generations. Some called him a sorcerer, others a miracle worker. But to Zawadi, in that moment, he was simply hope. He lifted her frail body into his strong arms and carried her through the dark forest. She could hear the sound of leaves crunching beneath his feet, the distant call of an owl, the soft murmur of the wind through the trees. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe. When she woke, she was wrapped in a thick blanket, lying on a soft mat in a warm room filled with the scent of herbs and burning wood. Baba Kamari sat nearby, grinding something in a stone bowl. "Eat, child," he said, placing a bowl of warm porridge into her hands. Zawadi hesitated. She had grown used to hunger, but the kindness in his voice made her trust him. She ate, her body grateful for the nourishment. Days passed, then weeks. Baba Kamari was not just a healer, he was a teacher. He taught Zawadi how to listen to the world in a way she never had before. "You do not need eyes to see," he told her. "The world speaks in many ways." He made her walk barefoot on different surfaces, grass, stone, mud, so she could recognize them by touch. He taught her to hear the difference between the rustling of trees and the movement of an animal. He showed her how to use her hands to read the shapes of objects, how to tell when someone was near just by sensing their warmth. Zawadi, once helpless, began to grow stronger. She no longer stumbled when she walked, no longer feared the darkness. She had learned to trust her other senses, to move with confidence. But Baba Kamari sensed something deeper. He had seen many illnesses in his life, but Zawadi's blindness was different. It was not the work of spirits, nor was it a natural disease. "Someone did this to you," he said one evening, as he crushed dried leaves into a fine powder. "A poison, not a curse, took your sight." Zawadi's hands clenched into fists. She had always known, deep inside, that Mama Jabari was behind it. But hearing it confirmed filled her with a new kind of fire. Baba Kamari worked tirelessly, mixing rare herbs, boiling roots, creating a remedy unlike any other. "It will take time," he warned, "but there is hope." For the first time since she had been abandoned, Zawadi felt something she thought had been lost forever: faith, not just in herself, but in the possibility of reclaiming what was stolen from her. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Under Baba Kamari's care, Zawadi's body grew stronger, but so did her mind. Every evening, as the fire crackled in the dimly lit hut, he told her stories, tales of warriors who had risen from nothing, of wise leaders who had been betrayed but still found their way to greatness. These warriors, he would say, his voice deep and steady, did not let their suffering define them. They did not seek revenge, only justice. True strength is not in hatred, but in resilience. Zawadi listened intently, absorbing every word. She had spent so long believing she was weak, that she was nothing more than a helpless girl thrown away by her own family. But now, she began to see herself differently. She was not just a blind girl left to die. She was someone who had survived. As Baba Kamari treated her, he helped her understand more than just survive. "The world is full of people like Mama Jabbar," he told her. "They are ruled by fear, by greed, by jealousy. But do you know what defeats them?" Zawadi shook her head. "Truth," he said simply. "Lies can last for years, but truth always finds a way to shine through." And then one morning, something miraculous happened. Zawadi woke up, as she did every day, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. But this time, there was something different. Something there. A flicker, a shadow, a hint of light where there had been only darkness for so long. She gasped, sitting up quickly. She blinked, and for the first time in months she saw something. A faint blur, a hazy shape moving in front of her. Baba Kamari knelt beside her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "It is beginning," he said with a knowing smile. "Your sight is returning." Tears streamed down Zawadi's face. She had thought she would never see again, never witness the colours of the world, the faces of people, the sky, the trees, her own reflection. But now, hope filled her heart in a way she had never known before. "It is not just your eyes that are healing," Baba Kamari told her. "It is your spirit. This is a sign, Zawadi. You are meant for something greater. You have a destiny to fulfill." For the first time, she knew exactly what she had to do. She had spent too long running from her past, too long fearing the woman who had stolen everything from her, but not anymore. With her vision slowly returning and her heart stronger than ever, Zawadi made a decision. She was going back to the village, back to face the past, back to reveal the truth that had been hidden for too long. The moment Zawadi stepped into the village, a wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. People dropped whatever they were holding, their eyes wide with shock. Some whispered in disbelief. Others took a step back as if they had seen a ghost. After all, they had all believed she was dead. She didn't flinch. She didn't lower her head. She walked forward with a confidence that made her seem almost otherworldly. She was no longer the frightened girl who had been cast away. She was stronger now, wiser, and she had come back to reveal the truth. The news of her return spread like wildfire. By the time she reached her father's house, a crowd had gathered. Her heart pounded, but she didn't hesitate. She stepped through the doorway, her presence filling the space like a storm waiting to break. Mama Jabari turned, and for the first time in her life, fear flashed across her face. Her hands trembled slightly, but she quickly forced a smile. "Zawadi, my child," she exclaimed, her voice sickly sweet. "We thought you were lost. We searched everywhere for you." Zawadi didn't respond. She simply stared at her stepmother with piercing eyes that could finally see. Mama Jabari shifted uncomfortably. The weight of her lies pressed down on her, and she knew she was running out of time. Matemi stepped forward, his face unreadable. "Zawadi," he whispered, his voice laced with confusion and something else. Guilt. He had let her go. He had believed the lies. And now, here she was, standing in front of him, alive. Zawadi took a deep breath, then turned to the people outside. "You were all told that I was cursed," she said, her voice steady and strong. "You were told that the spirits took my sight as punishment, that I brought shame upon my family." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some nodded, remembering the whispers that had spread through the village long ago. But it was all a lie. Zawadi's words cut through the air like a blade. "Mama Jabari poisoned me. She took my sight. She made my father believe I was worthless. And then she convinced him to abandon me in the forest like I was nothing." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Mama Jabari's face paled. "That is not true," she snapped, her voice higher now, desperate. "She was cursed. Then how am I standing here now?" Zawadi interrupted. Her voice was calm, but there was power in it. "How did I survive? How did my sight return?" The villagers exchanged glances. The fear in Mama Jabari's eyes told them everything they needed to know. Zawadi stepped closer, her gaze locked onto the woman who had tried to destroy her. "You did this to me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow louder than any scream. "But you failed." Mama Jabari opened her mouth, but no words came out. The truth had already been spoken. There was nothing left for her to say. The weight of her deceit, her cruelty, had finally caught up to her. Zawadi turned to her father. His face was twisted with emotion, shame, regret, disbelief. He had let this happen. He had believed the lies. And now he could no longer deny the truth standing before him. The village, once silent, erupted into whispers and accusations. The truth had been unveiled. The woman who had hidden behind false smiles and lies was now exposed for who she truly was. The village fell into a stunned silence as Zawadi's words hung in the air. The people, who had once whispered behind her back, now looked between her and Mama Jabari with wide eyes. The weight of truth pressed down on them all, demanding to be acknowledged. One of the elders, a man named Babu Tembo, stepped forward, his wrinkled face stern. "These are serious accusations, child," he said, his deep voice carrying authority. "Do you have proof?" Before Zawadi could speak, a figure emerged from the crowd. Baba Kamari, his presence commanding yet calm, stepped beside her. "I am her proof," he said. His voice, though not loud, held an undeniable power. "I found her near death, abandoned in the forest. I treated the poison that stole her sight, and I listened as she pieced together the truth that had been hidden for too long." The villagers murmured among themselves. They had heard of Baba Kamari, the mysterious healer who lived in the mountain. Some feared him, others respected him, but no one had ever heard him lie. Then, one by one, others began stepping forward. A woman who once worked as a servant in Matemi's house spoke hesitantly. "I saw it too," she admitted. Mama Jabari treated Zawadi like a slave. She would strike her when no one was looking, give her scraps to eat while her own daughter had plenty. A neighbor, an elderly woman who lived next door, shook her head. "I heard the cries at night," she said. "I knew something was wrong. But Mama Jabari was clever. She never left proof." And then, the most unexpected voice of all, Ayo, Mama Jabari's own daughter. She hesitated at first, wringing her hands, unable to meet her mother's eyes. But then she took a deep breath and stepped forward. "It's true," she said in a small voice. "Mama hated Zawadi. She was always afraid that father would love her more than us. She said we had to get rid of her." The village gasped. Mama Jabari turned to Ayo, her face twisted in fury. "You ungrateful child!" she spat. But the damage was done. The truth was undeniable. It had spread like wildfire, burning away every lie Mama Jabari had carefully built over the years. Matemi, who had stood frozen, finally seemed to understand the weight of his actions. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto his knees before Zawadi. His face was wet with tears, his voice shaking. "My daughter," he choked out. "I failed you. I let lies cloud my heart. I abandoned you when you needed me most. Please, please forgive me." Zawadi looked down at him, the man who had once been her protector, but had so easily believed the worst of her. Pain and anger swirled inside her, but so did something else. Pity. She had survived without him. She had found strength in her suffering. And now, she had reclaimed her truth. Before she could respond, a sudden movement caught everyone's attention. Mama Jabari. Panic filled her eyes. She turned, trying to push through the crowd, desperate to flee before justice could catch her. But the villagers had seen enough. Strong hands grabbed her arms, stopping her in her tracks. "You will not escape this," Babu Tembo said coldly. "Justice will be served." Mama Jabari thrashed, but there was nowhere to run. The same people she had manipulated for years now stood against her. Her power was gone. Zawadi watched as the woman who had stolen so much from her was finally caught in her own web of lies. The village, once blinded by deception, had finally seen the truth. The village gathered under the ancient baobab tree, where judgments were made, where truth was honored. The elders, their faces carved with wisdom and years of experience, stood in a solemn circle. Mama Jabari, once so powerful in her deceit, now knelt in the dirt, trembling. She had spent years weaving lies, but the truth had finally unraveled her web. Babu Tembo, the eldest of the council, raised his hand for silence. "For your cruelty, your deception, and the harm you have brought upon an innocent child, you are no longer welcome here," he declared. His voice was steady, final. "You are banished from this village. You will walk away from these lands and never return." Gasps spread through the crowd. Banishment was the greatest punishment, worse than prison, worse than any beating. It meant becoming a ghost, a forgotten shadow. Mama Jabari's mouth opened, but no words came. She looked around desperately, searching for an ally, but found only hardened stares. Even Ayo turned her face away. She had no one left. The villagers stepped aside as Mama Jabari was forced to her feet. She stumbled forward, her once proud posture broken. With no choice left, she walked away, disappearing into the horizon. Zawadi watched her go, but there was no triumph in her heart. She had not returned for revenge. She had not come back to punish. She had only wanted to reclaim what was stolen from her, her life, her truth, and she had. Mtemi approached her, his face still etched with regret. "I cannot undo what I have done," he said, his voice raw with pain. "But if you let me, I will spend the rest of my life making it right." Zawadi looked at him, the father who had once adored her, then thrown her away. The wound he had left in her heart would never fully heal, but she could see the sorrow in his eyes. He had lost so much to lies, and now he was ready to learn the truth. "I don't need you to fix the past," she said softly. "I just need you to never look away from the truth again." Mtemi bowed his head. It was a promise he would never break. The village, having seen Zawadi's strength, did not see her as a weak girl who had once been abandoned. They saw her as a survivor, a warrior of truth. They celebrated her return, not just as the daughter of Mtemi, but as someone who had walked through the darkest of nights and found the light again. Years passed, and Zawadi found her true calling. She traveled to the mountains, back to the humble hut where Baba Kamari had saved her life. She learned everything he had to teach about herbs, about healing, about the strength that comes not from anger, but from resilience. When Baba Kamari passed, Zawadi carried his teachings forward. She became the village's healer, the one people turned to in their moments of pain and uncertainty. People whispered about her story, how a girl once left for dead had returned, not just to survive, but to thrive. And when the lost, the broken, and the hopeless came to her doorstep, she healed them, not just their wounds, but their spirits.